ask questions during our time together. You can use the chat feature for an immediate response, right? If you have an immediate question, Molly can answer it in the moment. There's also going to be some time for discussion at the end of this session, so we can address your questions during that time as well. I want to begin by just taking a moment to express such a deep feeling of gratitude for your work as educators and your work as TLFs. Molly and I are incredibly grateful for your dedication to your profession and your willingness to join us today. We know that it is no small feat to juggle instruction, support for your school, and also spending an hour of your day, an hour of precious time with us. So thank you very much. Today, we're going to be focusing our time together on teacher wellness during virtual teaching and practical ways that we can begin to practice being kind to our own minds. Our aim is for you to come away with some tools that support your own personal teacher wellness and also provide you with some resources to take back to your school site. So I'm going to ask Molly maybe one more time to drop 2 resources into the chat. First, she's going to drop in the slide deck for this presentation. You have my complete permission to recreate this or use it with your staff, however you see fit. And she's also going to drop in a booklet that we created. This booklet is called Be Kind to Your Mind. And this booklet has a variety of resources for you and your staff to explore. If you would like to look through it now, you can, but we're also going to give you like at least 15 minutes in our session today to explore those resources. So you can also just hang on to it and open it in a little bit. If your mic is not muted, I'm just going to ask that you mute it to make sure we don't get any feedback. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to begin with a grounding exercise. So grounding is a kind of mindful practice that helps us deal with strong emotions, a restless mind, maybe unwanted thoughts or memories. These techniques help us to ground our awareness in the present moment so that we can focus on the task at hand. Grounding techniques are often used by individuals who deal with PTSD, anxiety, disassociation, or traumatic memories. But we also know that grounding is just a really great tool to help us focus in the moment. So we're going to practice a quick grounding tool together so that we're better able to focus on the time and space that we're sharing today. So I'm going to ask you to sit comfortably wherever you are with your body hopefully in a chair or at least pressed against something, maybe the floor. I'm going to ask you to close your eyes if it feels comfortable for you. But just as a reminder, we never want to make people close their eyes during mindfulness or grounding exercises because for people who have experiences with trauma, sitting with their eyes closed can sometimes elicit a trauma response. So open your eyes if you want, maybe cast your distance or your gaze into the distance or close them if that feels comfortable. So we're just going to take a minute to really notice our bodies sitting against the chair. And that sensation against the chair, maybe against our spine or our shoulder blades. And then moving our attention to our feet on the floor and pressing our feet firmly into the ground. And we're just going to take 3 really deep, strong breaths, focusing our attention on that breath. And then we're going to bring our awareness to our physical sense in the moment. And we're going to do that by just stating 4 statements quietly to ourselves. We're going to state our name, where we are physically, what we're doing, and our intention. So as I'm breathing, for example, I would say, my name is Anna Kay. I am sitting in my dining room in my home. I am attending the TLF Summit, and my intention is to connect with other teachers. So just say those 4 statements to yourselves as you take 3 more deep breaths. And then slowly we're going to bring our attention back to the space. Thank you very much. If you'd like, you can take a moment to maybe just drop in the chat what that experience was like for you. If this was a new tool, how you thought it worked to help ground your focus, or maybe your own experience with grounding exercises. So why are we prioritizing teacher wellness right now? I obviously don't need to tell you that this is a very stressful time to be a teacher. You are all very well versed in the challenges and the challenging realities of distance learning. So I'll be brief in my synopsis here. But we do know that teachers are overwhelmed currently, overwhelmed in ways that they maybe weren't in the physical classroom. They may be feeling overwhelmed by constant technology issues, the barrage of texts, emails, and phone calls they're receiving throughout the day, longer work hours, and relearning how to be a strong teacher in this new environment. In reality, many of us are feeling like first-year teachers all over again, and that feels overwhelming. This persistent, pervasive stress is leading to increased signs of depression, anxiety, and burnout. And on top of all this stress and exhaustion, we're also grieving, aren't we? We're grieving the loss of interaction with students in the face-to-face sense. We might be grieving the levels of competency and confidence that we may not be feeling anymore. And we're maybe grieving the way things used to be. And these are real and intense emotions. We also know that there are significant implications when we look at the impacts of prolonged teacher stress and prolonged teacher grief, including chronic fatigue, decrease in mental stamina, professional burnout, negative impact on professional performance and student outcomes, difficulty maintaining positive relationships, decreased ability to respond to stressful situations in the classroom. And I'm sure we, off the top of our head, can think of a couple ways to lengthen this list as well. So when we're using the word stress today, we're talking about the relationship between a teacher's coping resources and the demands of specific environments or stimuli. In their study on transactional theory and research on emotions and coping, Lazarus and Folkman explain that we experience stress where perceived demands exceed our personal coping resources and skills. So if we view stress in this way, that means that stress is dynamic, right? As we develop more coping skills, we can offset the imbalance between the demands of our life and our ability to cope with those demands or that stress. So that doesn't mean that stress really goes away entirely. Stress will never sort of leave our lives. However, it does provide some hope that we can develop skills that will help us to manage our own personal levels of stress. So I like to use the sort of visual of a mountain, right? All of us face mountains to climb each and every day. These mountains are symbolic of challenges and stress in our lives. So now, if I show up to complete a full day's hike or a full day's climb with only flip-flops and no gear, that climb is going to be torturous, right? I may complete it, but it's going to be awful. I'll have blisters on my feet. I probably won't have the gear I need to take care of myself. It'll be a torturous experience. But if I show up for that climb with practical gear and footwear, appropriate clothing, food, water, and a plan, the climb may still be challenging, but I'm better equipped to complete it successfully. So we can view the stress demands of virtual teaching as a mountain and teacher wellness tools as some of the resources that we need to be able to climb this mountain successfully. So we're going to talk about 3 teacher wellness tools today. Mindfulness practices, reflecting on spheres of control, and also intention setting. So let's begin with mindfulness. According to Kabat-Zinn, mindfulness is the awareness that emerges through paying attention on purpose in the present moment and non-judgmentally to the unfolding of experience moment by moment. So we can engage in mindfulness in a couple of different ways, right? We can direct our attention to a specific focus, and that focus can be our own breath, a sensation in our body, an experience, a feeling or emotion, or another intentional anchor. Many of us, when we think of mindfulness, our mind might go straight to sort of meditation and focusing on our breath. And that works really well for some people. For someone like me, that just really doesn't work as well. So I prefer to engage in mindfulness activities that focus on a sensation or experience, maybe using one of my 5 senses. Through practice, mindfulness exercises help us to cultivate an awareness of moment-to-moment experiences through the lens of acceptance and kindness. So for me, on these last 2 slides, the words that kind of come up as keywords are non-judgmental, acceptance, and kindness. And when we're practicing mindfulness, right, our goal is to focus on the present moment. But we are humans. So naturally, other thoughts, intrusive thoughts about what may happen in the future or what has happened in the past are going to enter our minds. When this happens, we're not going to beat ourselves up about these thoughts. We're going to notice them, not judgmentally, and compassionately redirect our focus back to the present moment so that we're not caught up in worrying about what could happen or dwelling on what has happened. I really appreciate this image. The idea of a mind that is full versus mindful. So how often do we get in our cars to drive somewhere? We arrive at our destination and we literally cannot recall any details from our drive, right? That happens. Maybe it's just me, but I would venture to guess I'm not the only person that does that. This happens all the time because we're like, in that moment, we're like this woman on the left. We are thinking of a million other things. Again, either things that may happen in the future or things that have happened in the past, instead of being focused on what is happening in the present or being mindful like the woman on the right. But this is hard. This takes a lot of practice. It's not really our natural state to just be focused on the present, right? We are anxious human beings, many of us, and so we're more comfortable thinking about the future or the past. So mindfulness takes practice. And for me, it helps to have some considerations for consistency when I'm practicing a new tool, right? So often I hear teachers say, oh, but I don't have time for this. And I would argue that you can't afford to not spend some time doing this, right? So that you can show up and be your best self for your students. So some ways to maybe consider integrating mindfulness into your routine is maybe doing a short mindfulness practice, either right before an activity that happens throughout the day or right afterwards. For example, I've been trying to take like 5 deep intentional breaths and focus on my breath before I ever click that little green Google Meet button that says join meeting. We can also do it before we turn on our car, right? That moment when you sit down in your car before we turn on the ignition. While washing our hands, all of us are probably washing our hands more frequently and for longer durations. This is a great time to really focus on that experience, right? That's our intentional anchor here. We might be focusing on our breath, but we're also focusing on the experience of washing our hands and how that feels in our hands and maybe the rest of our body. We can also set a timer to remind us, either on our computer, our phone, or our smartwatch. or starting to incorporate it into our teaching day, right? So maybe before we do a read aloud or before we start our morning meeting. Believe me, well, I don't have to tell you this, you know this. If we start to incorporate this into our school day, our students will not let us forget to do this, right? If they know it's part of the routine, it will become a part of our routine. Also, maybe before we start eating a meal, or just when we notice that we're experiencing difficulty focusing on the task at hand. So in that Be Kind to Your Mind booklet that Molly shared with you in the chat, you're going to find some mindfulness task cards on pages 5 through 9. These are prompts that you can use to work on your own mindfulness routines, and also resources to share with your staff at your school site. And many of these activities are also appropriate to share with students. So you might consider including them into your school day that way. But how can mindfulness help? It can help us to develop coping skills through improved self-regulation. It improves the relationships with one's own thoughts by encouraging self-compassion. Mindfulness is associated with lower levels of teacher stress, emotional burnout, cynicism, compassion fatigue, and missed workdays. And mindfulness is also associated with higher levels of efficacy, job satisfaction, and overall job performance. Next, we're going to move on to another teacher wellness tool called Spheres of Control, or Circles of Control. So this is a multi-dimensional measure of locus of control. Locus being the beliefs about what we can control either internally or externally. So humans naturally enjoy feeling in control, right? When we feel in control, we experience a sensation of safety, predictability, and comfort. But if we perceive a lack of control, we may feel uneasy, stressed, or anxious. Oftentimes, though, in our efforts to gain control, we create more problems for ourselves than solutions, right? Because the things that are in reality within our direct locus of control are pretty minimal. For teachers, this can be especially concerning or feel especially overwhelming because when we feel as though we're not in control, we may perceive ourselves as being ineffectual in some way, perhaps. This can lead to more stress and exhaustion, which can eventually lead to burnout. But we can mitigate some of these feelings by reflecting on our locus of control. So here we have recreated a spheres of control scale. So this visual can help us to identify specific factors in our life that we have direct control over, factors that we can influence, but we don't really completely control, and factors that impact us but are completely outside of our control or influence. And you'll see a link down to an article here from Ed Week, written by the brilliant Elena Aguilar, talking about how she uses spheres of control when coaching. So that might be a resource you want to check out later. So I used this spheres of control scale with a teacher who was feeling really overwhelmed by technology in her classroom. So we came up with this together. First, we started in that center sphere, the areas that we can control. So if I'm feeling frustrated about technology, there are some things I can absolutely control. I can control my reaction to frustration, right? I can control whether I slam down my laptop and leave the room, or if I take a couple of calming breaths and then try another approach to solve the problem. I can also control the expectations I set in my classroom, and I can control how I reinforce those expectations. I can control how I reflect on my own practice so that if through that reflection, I recognize my expectations were not clear, I can modify that. Those are things that are absolutely in my control. Then in that second sphere, that turquoise sphere, those are elements that I can influence, right? I have some agency to maybe modify them, but I don't directly control them. So that's something like student participation. I can't control that entirely, but I can influence it by making my classwork engaging, by reinforcing students who participate, by giving students increased and varied opportunities to respond to my prompts and the ideas of their peers, right? I can set up those systems and that influences their participation. I can also influence how I communicate the classroom schedule to my students and to their parents, right? I can control how I communicate it, and I can influence whether they use it or not. But I can't totally control if they use it correctly. And then that outside sphere, right? So the battery life of my student's device, that is out of my control. It's probably in a lot of instances out of my influence. Parents' frustrations with technology, I can't control that. I can be a listening ear, so in some ways I can influence it, but their emotions are their emotions, right? I can't really control or influence that. So that's something, if it's in that outside sphere, it might impact me, but I can recognize that's maybe something I need to let go of. So how can this help? Again, when we are stressed and overwhelmed, if we identify specific areas that we have control and we identify areas where we have influence, we can relinquish some of those things in that outside sphere. We can relinquish the stress and the amount of time and energy we are thinking about it because we can't control or influence those things. It also helps us when we identify areas that we can control. This can lead to creating an inventory of how to spend our energy, right? So if I'm spending all my time worried about my student's battery life on their device, and I recognize that's outside of my sphere of control and my sphere of influence, I can decide I'm not going to spend any more energy worrying about that. Instead, I'm going to redirect my energy on something I can control, like watching some ed tech videos so that I improve my own tech fluency. It can also help me with goal setting, time management, and also my use of influence and deciding where I have more levels of influence and how much time I want to spend leveraging that influence. And this all in turn promotes teacher resiliency, right, which is our ultimate goal. So the last tool we're going to talk about a little bit today is intention setting. So intention setting is a way to promote living our personal values in the present moment. Sometimes goal setting and intention setting are used interchangeably, but there's a slight difference. Goal setting focuses on future, measurable external achievements. When I think of goal setting, I think of those really well-written IEP goals, right? Something that's measurable with a setting and a way to measure my success, right? A percentage of success. But when I'm thinking about intention setting, I'm focused on the present and focused on my present actions, either in a relational or internal pattern, and really identifying those patterns. So goal setting is important, of course, right? We as teachers are incredibly goal-driven and data-driven, and that helps us to maximize our professional outcomes. However, as we begin to incorporate intention settings into our teacher wellness plan, we might begin to see some positive growth in that area. Intention setting tends to carry some of those same mindfulness keywords: non-judgmental, self-compassion, self-kindness. So when we drift away from our personal intentions, we don't beat ourselves up. We don't say, oh, I didn't meet my goal. Ugh, I'm the worst, right? We just gently guide our thoughts and actions back to the intention that supports our values in that moment. So as you can tell, I love a good graphic organizer. And much like the spheres of control scale, I thought using a visual or graphic organizer, it would be maybe a good tool to help me with my weekly intention settings. So Molly and I created this weekly intention setting worksheet. You can find both an example of this and a blank copy in your Be Kind to Your Mind Teacher Wellness booklet. I'm going to ask Molly at some point to maybe also drop a PDF link to a blank example of this, and also a link to another one that looks similar that I made using Google Docs, so you can kind of type directly into it. So let me talk you through how this works. So in this example, I chose a specific intention that I'm trying to work on this week. Or last week. I wrote this last week. So my intention was that I will remain physically, emotionally, and mentally present in meetings this week. And this intention, I chose this because it will help me move toward my values of my career, specifically my professionalism, and my relationships with others, my relationships with my colleagues or the teachers that I'm working with. So that's my intention for the week. And then I identified my sphere of control with this intention and my sphere of influence. So for my sphere of control, I noted that I can gently guide my thoughts back to the task at hand if my mind wanders. So if I'm sitting in a meeting and I start to think about something that may happen in the future, I can gently bring my mind back to the present. I can also control whether or not I look at other Chrome tabs during a meeting, right? I have control of that. That will help me be mentally present in the meeting. For my sphere of influence, so I can't control if my colleagues maybe take a conversation off topic. That's outside of my control. But I can influence that situation, right? And I said I can gently remind my colleagues of our meeting goals and norms. That's within my sphere of influence. And then finally, I created this daily mantra, or sort of a phrase to tell myself when I veered from my weekly intentions, as a way to gently guide my thoughts and actions back toward that intention and values. So this is kind of just like my own personal pep talk. So my mantra is, making mistakes is part of the process towards growth. I'm putting in the hard work to modify my thoughts and actions. So I've started creating these once a week, and I just kind of type it up and it lives on my desktop. I do it the first thing Monday morning while I drink my coffee, and then I just refer to it throughout the week. In this case, I'm referring to it before every time I enter a Google Meet, right? Because my intention is about meetings. So again, this is the format that I chose to use, but this could certainly be modified or simplified or changed in any way. The goal is really just to have a tool to remind us of our intentions. So how does this help? We know that intention settings help to improve one's ability to reflect on progress towards a value in the present moment. It helps us to prioritize how we spend our mental and emotional energy. It validates any progress we're making towards our values, even if it's baby steps. And it recognizes the process rather than the product, which is important. Important for intention setting, but also important for our own teacher mental health. So, oh, we're right on time. Oh heavens, that never happens. That's exciting. It is 12 o'clock. We're gonna have 15 minutes of self-selection. So you have some choices here. You have 4 choices, actually, or kind of a mix of the 4. You can either use the next 15 minutes, so from now, 12 o'clock, until 12:15, to stay here in this Google Meet with Molly and I'm going to guide us in a guided meditation session, or guided mindfulness session. Or you can engage in one of the 3 independent tasks in that Be Kind to your mind booklet. So in that booklet, you're going to find those mindfulness task cards, and you can use these 15 minutes to engage in those independently. You can look at the pages that focus on locus of control, and you might decide to fill out some of your own locus of control ideas, either in the booklet or just like on a piece of paper by making 3 circles. You can also maybe choose to engage in an intention setting activity, either using one of the graphic organizers we created or sort of maybe making your own intention setting graphic organizer. Now, if you stay with us, we're gonna do this mindfulness activity for 10 minutes, and then you'll have 5 minutes of personal reflection. I ask that if you do one of the independent tasks, that you do maybe engage in one of them for about 10 minutes, but then do some reflection time afterwards. And that can just be personal journaling, where you think about how that experience was for you, or by using one of the reflection prompts found in that Be Kind to Your Mind Teacher Wellness booklet. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to decide. We'll probably start here at 12:03. If you would like to leave this meeting to engage in this independent task, go for it. And we'll see you back here at 12:15. If you're going to stay here with us, I'll give you a minute to maybe grab a drink of water, and then we'll come back together and do a little mindfulness together. And are there any questions, or what questions do you have for me? Sorry, I should have asked that before I released you. Okay. So for this moment in time, I'm going to stop presenting. And we're going to do a little mindfulness activity together. Again, I just ask that you check your microphones and make sure that they're muted, just so that we're not hearing any background noise during this time. For this mindfulness activity, you are welcome to keep your camera on, but if it would help you to feel focused or secure, you are also welcome to turn your camera off.
I'm gonna just hop in real quick.
Yeah.
Ludovina, can you please mute your mic? We are getting a lot of feedback.
Oh, sorry, did not know.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Molly. Okay. So if you are here with me, thank you very much for staying. I'm going to do my best to make this as relaxing as possible. Again, you're welcome to leave your camera on or turn it off. Okay. Let's see. Okay, we're going to take a moment to just notice our bodies against our chair or against the ground, wherever we may be sitting. And we're going to take a moment to notice how the chair feels against our back, our spine, and our ribs, and our shoulder blades. And as we are sitting, we're going to start to begin to draw our focus towards our breath and how that feels with that slow, deep, intentional inhalation. And then again with that powerful, slow, intentional exhalation. And either sitting with your eyes closed or your eyes open with a soft gaze, taking 2 more really deep, intentional breaths. And we're going to focus on feeling that breath fully and deeply. Making sure that if we notice our breath catches in our chest, we try to breathe a little deeper so that we feel it all the way down into our belly and our diaphragm. Now moving our focus towards breathing into other parts of our body. Notice how that breath feels against our ribs and our spine. Do we feel it in our hips? How does it feel moving into and out of our mouths? And as we notice a thought popping up, maybe a thought about the future or a thought about the past, just returning to the sensation of the breath and noticing where we are breathing. We're beginning to draw our attention to feeling that air in other parts of our bodies, maybe as it touches our nose, and starting to visualize that breath as a three-dimensional thing that fills our lungs like balloons. And on the next inhalation, we're going to check in with our environment. We're going to notice any sounds around us. Maybe it's the hum of the swamp cooler or some traffic noises from the street. And maybe we're even noticing the sound of our own breath. And again, if we notice a thought about the future or the past, we're almost going to view it like a car driving past. We'll notice that it's there, and then we'll just bring our attention back to the breath, being fully present. And we're going to begin a body scan where we notice, we're going to start with where we are sitting in the chair. Noticing our body against the chair and where your feet touch the floor. We begin to bring our attention down to our toes, maybe wiggling them a little bit to check in with them. And moving our attention up through our feet and into our ankles. And how does our body feel in that space, in those joints? And then we're going to move our awareness up our calves and into our knees. Maybe we take a minute to just stretch and extend our legs and notice any feelings that creates in our joints or in our muscles. And as we relax our feet and press our feet, or relax our legs and bring our feet back to the floor, we begin to move that body scan, that awareness up into our hips and into that area where all of our organs are. And noticing if we feel any sensations in those organs. Maybe our stomach is growling, or maybe we notice that our lungs are filling deeply with air. And on the next inhalation, our awareness comes back up to our shoulders and our neck and our jaw. Just noticing any tightness there. Noticing those feelings and that tightness without judgment, but thinking about how we can make small adjustments to relax. And finally, we're going to move our awareness up through our face and our head and focus on that spot at the crown of our head, the very top. And just spend a moment of gratitude with our brain and how incredible our brain is and how hard it works. And then bringing that gratitude to our body as a whole and all the great things that it does for us. And then bringing the attention back to the breath. If we notice any intrusive thoughts, we gently just move back to the breath. And we'll finish this exercise with 3 very deep, intentional breaths. And we'll begin to slowly bring our awareness back to the room. Maybe we'll open our eyes and just kind of look around our space. Maybe make eye contact with our screen as that feels good for us. And as we're ready, we have about 4 minutes until we come back as a group. And I'm going to give you some space during this time. You can turn your cameras on or leave them off. And just maybe spend the next 4 minutes journaling about what this experience was like for you. And thinking about maybe where you want to include this practice into your day, or sort of any next steps with your mindfulness journey. So I'll give you a little over 3 minutes to do that, and we'll come back as a whole group at 12:15. I was talking while I was muted. That's a rookie mistake. It is 12:15. I know some of you are still journaling. I'm going to just give you a few more seconds to sort of wrap up your thoughts, and then we'll come back as a group. First of all, thank you. I know doing a mindfulness routine with a group virtually has kind of a weird or maybe not weird, that's not a good word. It has a very different vibe than doing it in person. So I appreciate your willingness to engage in that, even if it maybe felt uncomfortable or not what you're used to. Those of you who took some time to look at the independent resources in the Be Kind to Your Mind booklet, thank you. You are sort of our guinea pigs, so any feedback on that booklet we would very much appreciate. I know there were a lot of requests in the chat to make an editable version available. And that's totally on me. I did not make these editable, and I'm sorry, but Molly and I are gonna work together to remedy that and either send them out to you via email, since we have your emails in PowerSchool, that, and also make sure it's available on the TLN Hub website for you. So in our last 14 minutes together, once again, we're big into choice and structured choice. So you have a couple of options here. We have 3 different breakout rooms that we've created. We have a breakout room called TLF Summit Mindfulness. This is a room that you can go to if you would like to meet with a group of TLF colleagues and discuss either the mindfulness experience that you engaged in or how you could start to implement that at your school site. And we have these 6 reflection questions to guide your conversation, but they're not a requirement. You can also, you're the boss of you. You can take the conversation where you want it to go. There's also a breakout room if you would like to focus your conversation on spheres of control. So that is, if you go to meet.google and go to TLF Summit SOC for spheres of control. And finally, if you would like to direct your conversation around intention setting, you can go to TLF Summit Intention. Now, Molly and I are going to stay in this room, this space, and we'll just kind of open it up for a discussion if you have questions for us, or if you would like to bring up any concerns with us. This time is yours to spend. If you need to snarf down your lunch and you need to just leave, that's okay too, right? We won't hold you captive. After you've conducted your reflection conversation with your colleagues in these breakout rooms or with Molly and I, you are free to go. I so appreciate you. Thank you for spending time with us today. And I hope that we can start to talk about teacher wellness as a collective group more in the future. Thank you so much. So it looks like there's still some of us here in the room.